If you enjoyed the channel and our video content and would like to support us, you can do this in a couple of ways. You can sign up to our Patreon site, which is a monthly subscription to one of our 4 tiers, each giving you something different from early access interviews up to exclusive unseen footage. There's also the option of a one-off donation via PayPal, which allows you the option to donate an amount of your choice. Both options really help to keep this channel going and to continue putting out regular content for you good folk. So please take a look at aircrewinterview.tv/donate, and I thank you in advance. Thank you and enjoy. You then went on to fly the F-117. How did this exchange come about?
So the way the Navy works is you'll do sea duty, shore duty, and then sea duty because they, at some points in your career, they want you to have time to be with the family or start a family. And the only way that was going to be possible was shore duty. Otherwise, they'd keep everyone at sea for a long time. So I was thinking about my shore duty, what I wanted to do. During my first tour with VF-111, I was able to go through Navy Fighter Weapons School. I was one of the last power projection classes in 1993, had a great time. There were 7 or 8 Hornets and then 2 Tomcats in that class. So they always used to put us out front. Everyone would glom on us and the Hornets would go in and clean everybody up off our tail. And so I wanted to stay operational. I really enjoyed flying. I didn't want to be an instructor. And so I heard about exchange tours. And from what I'd read, there's exchange tours. You could fly F-16s or F-15s with the Air Force. You could fly F-5s in South America. There was an F-18 exchange tour in Switzerland, and in Norway, I believe, was flying F-18s. So there's a lot of different areas that you could do it. And so I told my detailer I wanted to do an exchange tour. And right before we were getting ready to leave on our cruise in about June of '94, I got a call from my detailer. They said, hey, how much air-to-ground experience do you have? I said, well, just the usual. We just got bombs in the Tomcat, so I dropped the 25-pound practice bombs. We dropped some live bombs. That's about it. He said, okay, I'm working on a exchange tour with the Air Force to fly the F-117. You okay with that? I'm like, sure. And I said, well, what's the F-117? Because I didn't know about it. Of course, these are the days before the internet, unless you watched some programs on cable TV or you've got Scientific American, you wouldn't know what the F-117 was because it was still very much a black program at that point. And I said, sure, why not? And so he worked program, put a package together. I got approved. And so that's how I got the F-117 slot. Apparently, they wanted to put an attack person there, somebody from the A6 community, but the A6s were going away, and the A6 detailer apparently never filled the slot, which is how the Tomcat detailer was able to grab that particular exchange slot. And for that, I earned the enmity of every A6 guy everywhere, because apparently this was the first time the exchange slot had come open, and I was told I was the first Navy guy to fly the F-117. Caveat, I went to the F-117 Sundown in 2006 or 2007. There was a big ceremony for that, and somebody whispered in my ear that I was not the first Navy guy to fly. So something happened up in Tonopah or in the test world. I don't know, but I was the first Navy guy to fly it operationally, shall we say. I finished off a cruise in December of '94, rolled into Holloman Air Force Base in January 1995, checked in the BOQ, and got started on the F-117 program. It was amazing. I never thought I'd live in New Mexico. I always thought I'd be on the coast, Virginia Beach, San Diego, Corpus Christi, down on the water. I thought, what am I doing in the desert? And I got to tell you, it was beautiful there. Absolutely beautiful. High desert. It would get hot during the day in the summer, but it would cool off at night. It was nice and cool in the winters. It was a phenomenal place to live. And then I get introduced to the F-117. Just absolutely amazing to see it. It was what they called a gray program at the time. So it moved from Tonopah to Holloman. I should have checked my dates, but it was around 92, 93. And they started up and building the infrastructure to support the F-117 there. I showed up, and the first thing I had to do was check into the training squadron, which was the 7th Fighter Squadron at Holloman. And I checked in. Of course, I was the only Navy guy in town. I had my nice khaki hat, and I had my green flight suit, and I was a lieutenant at the time. And the Air Force and Navy are a little different. They're a little more informal than the Navy, so that was a bit of culture shock for me. The first time I saw an enlisted guy calling his chief master sergeant by the first name, or the colonels and the majors calling the enlisted by their first name and not their rate and their last name, it's like, what are you guys doing here? And of course, as a lieutenant, the enlisted didn't show a whole lot of respect for lieutenants. You had to be at least a captain. And so I always stressed that I was a Navy lieutenant to get their attention. And there's, of course, one or two incidents of enlisted folks just not feeling the need to salute an officer. So I corrected them on the spot. And so they learned to recognize me on base, I think. But that being said, I have to tell you, incredibly professional force. The maintainers, the crew chiefs, these guys were superb that were working on the F-117. And let me just do a quick shout out to all the maintainers everywhere. We would not be able to get into the air without those 18, 19, 20-year-olds working their tails off in bad weather, cold weather, heat, in all kinds of difficult positions, situations, and countries to keep those airplanes up in the air. And they just did a phenomenal job. But particularly in Holloman there, those guys were great. The first thing was landing currency, because you had to have at least 1,000 hours of jet time, because there was no trainer versions of the F-117. And so they would take you out for 2 landing currency rides in the T-38. No big deal. Everybody in the Air Force flew the T-38 in their lead-in fighter training or as the advanced trainer. So they've all flown the T-38 before. It's just a question of hopping in, dusting off the cobwebs, and going out and banging out a couple landings. I approached the landing currency rides with a bit of apprehension. I'd never flown the T-38 before. And so I'm sitting there in the, it wasn't a simulator, it was just a mock-up. I'm going through all the emergency procedures. I'm like, it's just essentially trying to digest a whole other NATOPS or Dash 1 in about 2 weeks. I go out for my first landing currency ride. I'm like, listen, I got to be honest, I have not flared a landing in 6-7 years. Okay, it's been a while, and I've never flown the T-38 before. My IP said, don't worry about it. It's going to be fun. We're just going to go out. We're going to bang around. We'll come back, do a couple landings. It'll be super easy. So I said, okay. So we take off. We fly out to the working area. He says, okay, we need to burn down a little bit of gas first. So why don't you go ahead and do a loop? I'm like, okay. What are the parameters? He said, well, just get about 450 knots. You're going to have to go into afterburner. I'm like, okay, just like the Tomcat, no problem. Go ahead and engage the afterburner, start, get the appropriate amount of knots, start pull up, pull over the top, full afterburner coming around over the top. And the one thing he didn't mention was you need to come out of afterburner on the backside. So here I am, nose down at a T-38, accelerating, and the airspace in New Mexico, of course, White Sands Missile Range, 4,000 feet. You've got the mountains off to the east that are about capped off at 12,000 feet. So the bottom of the working area is 14,000 feet. Here I am at 20,000 feet, approaching supersonic, and with only about 4,000 feet to pull out at the bottom. And so naturally, I didn't want to break the bottom. I pulled very hard on the stick and overstressed the T-38. So that was the summary of my first T-38 ride, landing currency ride. We went back, he did the landing. Then the next 2 rides went a lot better. I figured out how to land the T-38. It was very challenging for me, but they were very patient and got me through that. So that was neat. But then on the F-117, the 7th did a phenomenal job with the training. The simulators were fantastic. And the first ride, again, because there are no trainer versions, is simply just a taxi ride. You get in, you start up, you go through all the startup procedures, you taxi down the runway. But before I get to that, the first time sitting in an F-117 getting ready to fire it up, I jump in, and I'm going through the cockpit, going through the switches, and I look upper left-hand corner, which most people don't realize. I think probably most of your audience would know that most fighter aircraft have a tail hook. Of course, the Navy, we use it for landing on a carrier, but the F-16, F-15, F-4, F-111, they use it in case they have to catch the wire at the field. F-117 has a tail hook. It's recessed, it's got some radar absorbent material under it, and there's a button that you have to push, which blows the radar absorbent material off to lower the tail hook. I jump into the cockpit the first time, and there's a piece of tape over the tail hook button, and it says not for naval use. So my crew chief was looking out for me. He said, "Hey, I know this may be a habit. Don't do this to my airplane." And I'm like, "Okay, got it. We had some fun on that." But then taxied out, came back, and just it was really, really neat. The sortie curriculum itself, there's really only about 10 or 11 sorties in the 7th just to get your basic familiarization. You did your combat readiness in the 8th Fighter Squadron, which I went to. There were 2 squadrons, the 8th and 9th. And so it was just some basic familiarization sorties, a couple weapons sorties. There was 1 formation flight, and then, of course, a tanking flight. And that introduced me to the philosophical differences between the Air Force and the Navy. I was on the formation flight. I'm not going to name the instructor because I don't want to get him in trouble. But we're up here on flying formation. It really wasn't that difficult. 2-ship formation was fine. The F-117 was all fly-by-wire. And it would not fly unless you had the air data and the flight control computers were working. If you lost all power to the aircraft, if your generator died and your battery died, then you have to eject. The plane would just go out of control. But because of that, it just wasn't really a natural flow. It was very sort of wobbly. They called it the wobbly goblin. It wasn't smooth. It was okay, but it wasn't smooth. So 2-ship formation was fine, but when you got into 4-ship formation and you're out on the end there, it was really kind of bouncy and a little unpredictable. But the 2-ship flying was just fine. I was on one wing, crossed over, went to the other wing. That was fine. Started doing some turns, and then he started doing a turn away from me and just pulling away from me. And the F-117 is not overpowered because of the shape of the exhaust. And so I did what I was taught in the Navy. You stay in formation, you stay in position. So I crossed under the inside of the turn as a smart wingman would, so I could stay with my flight lead, so I didn't get blown way out a mile behind him. And so I crossed under, and I'm there, and then he rolls out a couple more cross unders. We come back, and in the debrief he says, "What do you think you were doing?" I'm like, "Hold on a sec. What happened?" He said, "You crossed under. I didn't tell you to cross under." And I'm like, "Well, a smart wingman, I don't want you to leave me in the dirt there." And that's, of course, is the mantra for the Air Force is the flight lead only wants to hear 2 bingo or lead you're on fire as their standard calls. That's the only thing they want to hear out of a wingman. I'm like, "Hey, we do smart wingman, not that. So, okay, I'll try to adjust my mentality a little bit, but I am a Navy Fighter Weapons School grad, and I will do what I need to do, I think." And then we went up tanking, and they said, "Hey, this is going to be really challenging, tanking. You've never done this before. It's going to be kind of hard. You got to get up there. You got to fly in formation, and then the boomer is going to of course, engage you." I'm like, "Okay, I've tanked on KC-135s at night in a basket with the probe and drogue system. I won't do that on camera because it has odd look in there. But of course, in the Navy, we have to do the probe into the drogue, and the Air Force has the boom. And the probe and drogue can be very, very challenging." So I get up there, and I'm flying, and I'm getting there, and I'm following the lights, and they plug me, and I'm like, "Okay, this is okay. This isn't too hard." And get back, but that was super easy. It was great, and again, the professionalism of the tankers was really, really good, with one exception. Can I go back to a quick Tomcat story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So over Afghanistan in was it 2000? Yeah, so it was Tomcats, 2001, over Afghanistan. Mostly we refueled over Pakistan, but towards the last couple of weeks before we left theater, we were refueling over Afghanistan. But the tankers would always keep their lights off, and they were stay at a fairly high altitude to avoid any surface-to-air threat. And so I was going up to tank off this KC-135 at night, no moon, and he's up at 27,000 feet. And the Tomcat with the turbofan engines, not very responsive up at high altitude. And if you have to make a quick correction, sometimes you'd have to plug in a burner just to stay in the basket. If you start drifting out, by the time the engine's responding, you got to tap burner a little bit just to stay in. He didn't want to turn on those lights. There's no moon. I said, hey, can you turn your lights? Nope, not doing it. I said, well, hey, can you at least descend a little bit to make it easier for me to tank? He said, nope, not doing it. And so that was particularly challenging. Next night, I go out to meet my tanker, VC-10, Brit tanker, 27,000 feet, lights out. Hey, do you mind turning your lights on so it's a little easier to find you? He said, sure, no problem. Lights on. Go in there, find him, join up. I said, hey, it's a little challenging. Can you drop to altitude, sir? Hey, yeah, no problem at all. What altitude do you want? So shout out to the Brit tanker pilots. If you're out there, thank you very much. You guys were awesome in 2001. I never had a bad experience with a British tanker. Very, very flexible. So back to the F-117 now. I had to get that plug in. Finished up training with the 7th, then went over to the 8th for combat readiness. And again, that took about 2 months flying those sorties. Very professional group, working with the FLIR, practicing attacks, working with the legacy INS. When I joined them, we had the old B-52 INS that took about 40 minutes to align. So the INS was aligning when you went out to start up, and then you'd simply take the alignment and then go. While I was there, they did the RNIP upgrades and got the GPS integration, and so that was really neat. And they also got the FLIR upgrades as well. Before you'd go on your practice attacks, you really wouldn't have a really good picture till about 15 or 20 seconds prior to release. And so you'd have to work really quickly going with your photographs. But then after that, we got the FLIR upgrade, the GPS, and it was relatively easy to find the targets because the GPS, we'd have to practice slewing off or doing offset attacks to make it more challenging. F-117, phenomenal aircraft, was really good at what it did, the best, I think. You'd launch as a 4-ship, you'd take off, everyone would fly their separate routes for an hour and a half, and then you'd do a simultaneous attack over Red Rio, the range in White Sands Missile Range, and you're sitting there with your time on target. You haven't talked to anybody for an hour and a half. You're looking through your FLIR, you're at your altitude, and you count down to time to impact. All of a sudden, 1 bomb, 2 bomb, 3, 4, all within a course of a second, all 4 bombs hit the target at the same time. You go, this is just amazing. Just a talented bunch of folks, great airplane, great training program, great pilots. It was an absolute pleasure to do that. And of course, one of the fun things about the F-117, it was a threat to foreign adversaries, so it got to deploy quite a bit. We're supposed to deploy to Vincenza in '96. We did not go, but ended up spending about 3 or 4 deployments to Kuwait, Al Jaber Air Base, to deter aggression up there. And our training flights there were limited to just doing the clockwise and counterclockwise flights around Kuwait because we didn't want to familiarize any adversary with practicing looking at the radar cross-section. Of course, we always flew with the radar cross-section enhancers on so people could see us. Very, very important. One of the things you'd be doing across country in the F-117, and when you're flying through the U.S., air traffic control say, hey, you got coming up on a 737, it's going to be 1,000 feet below you, or hey, you got 2 F-15s out at 20 miles. F-15s would be on the same frequency. They'd say, oh, radar contact on the F-117, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, we've got radar cross-section enhancers. You're lying anyway. But we would fly in Kuwait, and we'd do really challenging 60-day tours. Wasn't too hard, but Al Jaber was a phenomenal airfield. We shared the facilities with the A-10 guys. The A-10 folks were there after Desert Storm, and they stayed there even after we were gone. Quick shout out to the A-10 guys. Loved you guys because they were going there so often that they smuggled in all the parts for a hot tub. And so at Al Jaber there, they built their own hot tub that they let us use because they would fly during the day. We would fly at night, and we jump in the hot tub after we get back at night. So thanks very much, all you Warthog guys. Great job there at Al Jaber. So we spent a lot of time there. I think my last trip to Al Jaber, we deployed in 90, late 97, early 98. And it was a 60-day deployment. And while I was there, they said, hey, we want to leave a couple guys behind so we could do handover with the ninth, who was taking over the next 60-day deployment. They asked for volunteers. I said, sure, I'll do it. I was a weapons officer at the time. I'm like, I got no issues with that. I've done 6-8 month cruises. What's 120 days? That's not a big deal. So we did that. And the other guy who volunteered was Kid Remfer. He was American Airlines, but he was reserve. He went active duty for a while, and he was the same way. It's like, 60, that's nothing. That's easy. But it was 60 days was a long time for Air Force folks. But that was fun and great homecoming after that. And then I went back to the Navy, but a lot of fun flights. Oh, real quick, while we're talking about the F-117, one of our deployments to Kuwait, we had to bring the airplanes back to swap them out. And so I got to fly over to Kuwait one time, taking jets over. That was phenomenal. Launch out of Holloman at 10 o'clock at night, pick up your tanker. Tanker drags you all the way up north over the ocean. We ended up landing in Morone Air Base about 11 and a half hours later, land there. And then we flew from, after a day or two off, we flew from Morone Air Base in Spain all the way to Kuwait. So one time we were bringing the F-117s back from Kuwait. And because I got to fly over, I didn't get to fly back. And I was the safety observer on the KC-10 tanker. So we got to Morone, took off out of Morone. I'm in charge of coordinating the diverts, talking to their planes, making sure everybody's doing fine on maintenance and fuel, keeping track of their fuel states, keeping track of the next refueling time. We approach the Azores. We pass the Azores. We're getting to a point in the middle of the Atlantic where diverts are going to be a long way either way. And I said, okay, divert right now is the Azores. The weather is Cavu, clear air, visibility unlimited. And winds are, 3 knots out of the west, temperature's 82 degrees, beautiful. And in about 10 minutes, your divert is going to be St. John's, Newfoundland. And it's 600 overcast, no showers. The temperature's 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And that sounds cold, doesn't it? Yeah. Everybody laughed. And 15 minutes later, one of the jets had an engine rollback. It's like, oh, okay. So our divert is now St. John's. And so the tanker steered us up to St. John's, got up there, made sure the planes were all topped off, and the 2 F-117s landed there in St. John's. This is in February, St. John's, Newfoundland. They landed safely, and then the tanker landed. And we're like, okay, what next? And first step, of course, is security. We called back to base. Canadian Defense Forces came over. They jumped in, provided security. And the most important thing, though, is we just came from Kuwait in our desert flight suits and our lightweight jackets. And the first thing they gave us was parkas. So that was kind of fun. They towed the airplanes into the hangar. KC-10 said, hey, you guys need anything? We're out of here. And they took off 15 minutes later and left us there with one broken jet. And we got about a week there in Newfoundland, courtesy of the CDF. They flew in an engine, and some maintenance folks got us repaired. And St. John's, very hospitable. Again, shout out to our CDF forces over there. They did a great job taking care of us. But that was my week in Canada, and that was a lot of fun. And they spoke English there. The reason I stress that is because when I was with VF-41, we did the Maple Flag exercise in Canada. I believe I mentioned that earlier. And it was great working with all the international forces. And on our way back from Cold Lake back to Naval Air Station Oceana, we stopped in Quebec for an air show that was happening. And we did a static display with the F-14. And Quebec is very proudly French speaking. And I thought, well, of course, everybody speaks English on the side, but that was not the case. And so that was my first French lesson. I had to figure out how to say F-14s, which I guess is F-14 in French. And so I had to learn how to say that, but that's about the only thing I could say in French to describe the F-14 to all the native French speakers there. St. John's, pure English, worked great. Got screeched in and did drink quite a bit there on the waterfront. Not a big tourist time at the time, but had a great time. So, yeah.
Yeah. So before we move on, what was the social side like? Obviously, coming from the Navy, did you feel welcome on base and with the F-117 community?
The social side was great. It was very much like the Navy. In the Navy, a lot of drinking. Air Force, a lot of drinking. But the drinking was a lot more convenient because in the Navy, we had to drive all the way from the flight line over to the officers club. And in the Air Force, they got a bar in the squadron. I don't know if you knew that or not. You probably did, talking to some of the Air Force guys. So there's always a keg, there's always popcorn, and there's this nasty stuff called Jeremiah weed that
Oh
I
my
was
God.
introduced to. Yeah, I had to go through a naming ceremony. Obviously, in the F-117 community, everyone had their call signs when they showed up. So it's simply a process of reaffirming, but you have to go through the process. And so, of course, numerous alternatives were proposed, shots were done, and then, of course, you ended up with the original call sign. Luckily, certainly didn't need Kickstand of Love. I ended up stayed on with Beaker, which was interesting because Beaker, I wanted something, you go in to become a fighter pilot, you want something like Spine Ripper, Killer, Snake, something like that. And of course, I ended up with a Muppet Beaker because I'm particularly tall. I'm about 6'3". I had a long neck and my hair used to be red, nice bright red. But it's faded a bit since then. And so every squadron I got to, who you look like? You look like that Muppet Beaker. I'm like, well, he's an internationally recognized figure, doesn't necessarily inspire fear in the hearts of the enemy, but it will do. And so it's been Beaker ever since. So, but socially, it was about the same. The Wives Club I was single when I was in Miramar in San Diego. Didn't have much to do with them, but all the squadron get-togethers, rowdy, lots of fun. I didn't play football, but my equivalent would be like a football locker room, just rowdy, lots of fun. In the squadron itself, the beer, the social, it was kind of fun with the F-117 because you did most of your flying at night. So going back and have a couple beers afterwards was super easy. And the one exception was during the summer at Holloman, they had what they call the monsoon season, where the thunderstorms would build up in the afternoon. So that was during the summer. We would actually fly during the day to land before the thunderstorm started up. And that was actually a lot more challenging than flying at night because with the sun out, the thermal shape of the targets was blurred because everything was hot. It was actually much more difficult to use the FLIR during the daytime than the nighttime when you had the crisp, clear lines because of the different thermal qualities of the targets, the ground, and the different materials. So that was actually really challenging, great training. But again, having a bar, the social scene, lots of drinking, lots of fun. Of course, the club got introduced to crud at the pool table there. And as Brent Baraducci mentioned when he was talking about his F-16 exchange tour, I did in fact meet my wife in the middle of New Mexico. San Diego, I was gone quite a bit, lots of women there, but back in the day, people didn't like writing letters, so I was gone so much, never really had time for a relationship. But on shore duty, as the Navy promised, I would meet someone, and I did. I met my wife. She was there working with the test squadron on a classified project, and we ended up getting married. And it was kind of fun. We lived on base together, on base housing. and I would meet her for lunch. But it's kind of funny. It's like, so how's your day going? Well, can't tell you. How's your day going? Well, I can't tell you. And so we had to keep our topics to more social. Hey, let's go camping this weekend or something like that. So we couldn't really talk about work. But Carrie, I married up. She's incredibly smart, aerospace engineer. But it was lots of fun, and that really made my tour at Holloman fun. The Wives Club was a bit more social slash political, in my opinion, than it was in the Navy. But again, they liked their get-togethers, and our house on base was very close to the officers' club. And of course, drinking and driving is never encouraged. So people would walk back to their homes. And there's a thing called roof stomping in the Air Force. I don't know if that's come up before, where they would come by and bang on your door, jump on your roof, and cause general havoc until you fed them beer. And being on the way home from the O Club, we took to just leaving a six-pack on our front doorstep so people would grab on their way by on Friday nights. So it's just a precaution, a measure of safety. Lots of fun. It was just fun. It was a fun time of my life. Had a great time. Loved living in New Mexico. The people were great. Colonel Chip Setner was my first commanding officer there. Joey Salata, our operations officer, in the 8th. He went on to command the 9th Fighter Squadron. I'm still in touch with him. Phenomenal guy. There was the mix themselves. There were A-10 guys, there were F-16 guys, F-15 guys, F-111. A couple Wild Weasel F-4 guys were there when I was there. So it was a great mix. Everybody had different stories. Everybody had something different to bring to the table, which was great, both in tactics, mindset, and I like to think that I shared and had some influence on how they did things. I certainly made sure everybody knew that just because you were in a parking lot, you still had to salute officers. So that was my legacy, I guess, at Holloman. So.
Then obviously you went back I think you went to the Tomcat squadron after this exchange tour. One question I want to ask, could you talk about that exchange with your squadron mates if they said, right, what's it really like? Or did it have to be still classified?
So that was there was a neat transition for me. It was fun. I was able to talk about just about everything. The F-117 itself, there's a really good book called Skunk Works.
Yeah.
I believe I've got the book. Talks about the F-117. I thought some of the stuff in there would be classified. Apparently it's not because it got approved. So there's a lot I could talk about the F-117. Of course, the one thing that you don't talk about are radar cross section, any of the tactical capabilities. What was the range on the F-117? Unlimited with air refueling, standard answer. So there's a lot I could talk about. I could talk about the FLIR, just how we did that. And my experience with the FLIR made me very valuable as a Tomcat got the Lantern pod, and I could talk to Rios about how to use it with my experience and some targeting. I actually, on our first cruise as we were heading over to Kosovo, I did a couple training sessions just on funneling techniques to get into the target area and find your target. The biggest and most embarrassing thing, though, was in the Air Force, when you do touch and goes or request closed patterns. This is mostly done in the T-38. We didn't do practice touch and goes with the F-117. You'd come in, you'd do your touch and go, you'd climb up, full power, raise the gear, pitch out, come around, lower the gear, and come down, do another touch and go. And that's how you did touch and goes in the Air Force. In the Navy, when we go into the landing pattern, we drop the gear, we come in, we pitch out, brake as we call it, come around, drop the gear flaps, speed brakes out, come around, fly the pattern, touch down, full power, climb up in the dirty configuration, come around for another touch and go. So my first ride back in the Tomcat, I had Beetle Bailey was one of the instructors at VF-101 on the East Coast, where I got requalified. He was a CAG. I think he made Admiral. I'm not sure. Beetle, I'll have to check on him. Great guy. He was a phenomenal commanding officer of a squadron. He was a CAG. He went a lot further than I did. But he was in my back seat. So we go out. I get familiar with the Tomcat again, pulling G's, having a great time. Come back to the break to do some touch and goes. come in, I brake, dirty up, come down, fly the pattern, a little bit rusty flying the ball, touchdown, full power, accelerating up, gear up, flaps up. I start accelerating to about 200, 225. Beetle said, "What you doing?" I said, "Aha." I said, "I'm just going to assume everybody saw that and not just try to explain myself away." So I throttled back, put up speed brakes, lowered the gear, lowered the flaps, turned downwind before Tower could yell at me. And I came back around and I said, "Okay, that's one Air Force habit I got to drop right away."
Yeah.
And but getting back into the swing of things in the Tomcat, a lot of improvements happened while I was with VF-41. We got digital flight controls. Of course, the big thing in the Tomcat was direct lift control. We started getting that at the tail end of VF-111, where you could actually kill a little bit of lift with the thumb wheel, which is a story about the Hornet later on, because the Tomcat would tend to bolter as you got in close. You had a little bit of power, and you got a little bit of ground effect, and the Tomcat would float. So you could just simply roll that thumb wheel. The spoilers, which were up, would come up a little bit more and kill a little bit of lift and come back down and help you counteract that little floating sensation in close so you didn't bolter. So that was great, but a bad habit pattern for the Hornet. That was great. Getting digital flight control systems was great because we finally got an autopilot that worked. Got the Lantern pod with the GPS. The Tomcat was really ready to go out there and do some effective combat work with our Hornet brothers, dropping bombs and doing a lot of work out there.
Great stuff. But let's briefly move on to your Hornet time. As I said, we could probably talk about the Hornet as a whole other episode. But if you can tell us what it was like going on, and did you enjoy flying it?
Absolutely. So it was a bit of a road to the Hornet. After I got back from VF-41, I attended Staff College in Australia. Highly recommend Overseas Staff College if you can swing it. Had a great time down there for a year, and then did my staff assignment at Headquarters U.S. European Command in Germany, which was, again, another great time. Loved living in Germany, and that was where I screened for command. And the nice thing about being in Germany for your staff assignment as opposed to the Pentagon is I got to wear my flight suit every day. So always a bonus. Walking around in footsie pajamas all day. I miss it terribly. But after I got selected for command, I went to VF-125 Rough Raiders out there at Naval Air Station Lemoore to get checked out on the Hornet. Because I'd never flown the Hornet before, I was scheduled for a full workup starting in December, about a 9-month full syllabus. Ended up getting about 3 or 4 months so I could join them on cruise. And so essentially it was a couple familiarization flights, 1 or 2 bomb dropping flights, a couple ACM flights, and then FCLP, and then back out to the boat. Hornet, so easy to fly. Flying itself, the flight control system was great. Autopilot was great. Auto throttles were great. Having a working flight path marker, the Tomcat with the Legacy INS. Yeah, we had a flight path marker, but the one thing that you trusted about the flight path marker was that it was not accurate. So in the Hornet, when you're lining up to do your carrier landing, you can put the flight path marker in the crotch of the angle, the forward part of the angle before the Cats 1 and 2 go forward. Hold it there, and that would give you a good stabilized sight picture to fly the ball and trap. The Tomcat, you never looked at the flight path marker. It would just get you dizzy and didn't do anything well. And of course, the HUD jumped around all the time. So it was truly a visual approach in the Tomcat. It was hard. It was work. I never made the top 10 in the Tomcat. Every line period in the Navy, the folks with the highest landing grades, the top 10 of those would get a patch. In VF-111, it was always the Hornet guys. Every now and then, we'd have a Tomcat guy break into the top 10. Always the Hornet guys. Again, that's where I thought they were cheating. Got to fly the Hornet and realized, yes, they were in fact cheating. Because you go in there with the auto throttles, you put the flight path marker at the crotch, you just sort of look at the ball, flight path marker, angle of attack, auto throttles, boom, 3-wire. Never once boltered. Actually got to make the top 10 once when I was in VFA 25. But again, a reduced syllabus. The instructors there were great. They knew I had lots of experience, but again, not a whole lot of experience in the Hornet. Got through that and joined VFA 25, Fist of the Fleet, out on cruise there in 2006, and got out there. They said that I had about 60 hours or so in the Hornet at that point. And they said, okay, you're going to do a practice ride. We're going to give an LGB. You go to the bombing range in Kuwait. I'm like very familiar there because of my time in Al Jaber. I dropped an LGB. They said, okay, now you're good to go for OIF. I'm like, okay. And so I started in OIF there in 2006 with VFA 25, and just flew a lot of neat missions over there. Great JOs, great squadron, great air wing. We had 2 Super Hornet squadrons and 2 Hornet squadrons. Our sister squadron was the 113, VFA 113. And of course, we had 2 Super Hornet squadrons as well. They were great. The one difficulty was that there were 5 Beakers in the air wing. Unfortunately, I thought I had a fairly unique call sign. This is the first time I ran into that. There was one on the admiral's staff, so he was Beaker the Elder. There was an operations officer in the other one of the Super Hornet squadrons. He was a short Beaker. There was another executive officer who was Beaker in the Super Hornets, and then I was tall Beaker. So we had it all sort of sorted out with modifiers there, but it was interesting being one of many Beakers. A lot of fun missions that first cruise over OIF. The one thing that made the Hornet unique from the Tomcat was that you could actually do night strafing. Where we had night vision goggles in the Tomcat, but because the Tomcat, the gun was pointed about 3 degrees high, which is ideal for air-to-air gunnery, not so much for air-to-ground gunnery. So we never really did night strafe in the Tomcat. In the Hornet, where it's on the fuselage center line, we practiced it and did it. I practiced it once with goggles. It's really kind of tricky because when you night strafe, you're on the pattern, you're on the goggles, it's okay. But as soon as you pull the trigger and the gun goes off, you're blinded. You can't really see anything out of the goggles, can't really see anything in the cockpit. So it can be very, very challenging. One of my first couple of missions over in OIF, Iraqi Freedom, I'm leading wingman, JO from the sister squadron. We're up there, it's at nighttime. And again, I've got 65, 70 hours in the Hornet. And the ground controller says, hey, we got a target. We want to know if you're up for some night strafing. And I'm like, I've done it once. It's like that commercial. Hey, are you an expert? I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night. Like, no, I wasn't an expert. So I asked my wingman, he was pretty junior. I said, hey, how comfortable are you night strafing? He said, well, not very. This is on our attack frequency. I said, well, you know what? Me neither. And so collective team decision there. We said, hey, not ready for the night strafing right now. How about a show of force, show of presence? He said, that'll work just fine. And so we went down low, dropped a bunch of flares, made ourselves known, a lot of burner, shook them up quite a bit, but did not do night strafing that time there. Just wasn't quite ready for it. And again, that's critical decision making. That was a safety decision. You got to take into account capabilities of both yourself and your wingman. And I stand by that decision. A lot of other great times, again, over Iraq, just some targeting, day strafing. One situation coming back from one of the missions, it was a night recovery. It was a daytime launch. We went out and did our mission daytime. I'm coming back, and I'm flying off wing of one of our more senior JOs. And the one thing I remember from my first tour in VF-111 was the worst thing that could happen in a Hornet was if you had runaway winds in the inertial navigation system dumped. Why? Because they lost that beautiful flight path marker, that beautiful velocity vector that told them everything about the airplane. And I knew that was a big deal. And every time that happened, they'd let them have 1 or 2 looks at the deck, and then they would divert them to the beach. And so I'm coming back to the carrier. And all of a sudden I'm looking, I see my flight path marker just track all the way over to the right. I'm like, hey, what are you showing for winds? He said, I'm showing, I asked my flight lead, he said, yeah, they're out of the southeast at about 10 knots. I'm showing 270 at 100. Yeah, it looks like you got runaway winds. You need to dump your INS, turn your INS off. So I did that. Like, okay, like I'm in standby, huh? I remember that. They always used to divert the folks to Kuwait. So we go back and check into the boat. I'm in standby. And I'm waiting for them to tell me, hey, your signal divert to Al Jaber or Kuwait City. And never came. They said, okay, fly off your wingman and he'll drop you off on the ball. I'm like, really? At night? Okay. So I flew on his wing. He took me to about a mile, 3/4 mile. He peeled off. This is at night. And I transitioned from flying wing to flying the ball. And it was just a standard Tomcat approach, really. I'm used to the water line, adding power. The auto throttles weren't working with that either. And so I'm just flying a manual landing. Landed kind of hard. I apologized for doing a Tomcat landing, did not pop a code. Safe recovery, no problem, first pass. Taxied out of the wires, landed, shut down, went into the ready room, and everybody said, hey, great job on the standby approach. And then the junior officer, who was the squadron duty officer, said, hey, nice job, but that's odd how the airborne realignment with the GPS didn't work for you. I said, the what? I said, yeah, you can do a realignment with the GPS airborne. I'm like, I've got 60 hours. You guys are supposed to talk to me about this, okay? I didn't know this. I didn't have that in the Tomcat. It wasn't the Hornet. You got to give me the information. I felt like Austin Powers, when he was Dr. Evil there. I need the info here, people. I've been asleep for 20 years. And so, we had just to talk about, don't assume, and that goes into a lot of the crew resource management at the time, the human factors, don't assume everybody knows everything, make sure everybody's clear, go through all the procedures. And we had a big meeting on that after that. So just because I had 2,000 hours in the Tomcat, I had 600 hours in the F-117. I actually had some of the top flight time on base at the time by the time I left, because a lot of the Air Force guys were mid-career, so they'd do about a year or two and then go to staff college or to another assignment. I got a full almost 3.5 years there. I was high man, but I only had 60 hours of the Hornet. So yes, yeah. I knew a lot, but I don't know all the technical stuff. So feed the old guys the info there. Don't assume they know everything.
Well, it sounds like you had an amazing career, but to wrap up this interview, Beaker, we got some personal ones here, if you're happy with those. Let's go for this. So, Beaker, do you have any hobbies?
Hobbies right now. So I finally retired. When I got out, I went to work for oil and gas because the airlines weren't hiring at the time. And I had a great career with them. Took a retirement last year. So working on the hobbies, I was raising 4 active kids for a long time. So they're heading off to college now. Of course, we're in Texas, so shooting guns is always fun. I heard Brent Baraducci mention he liked little feral pig hunting as well there. But mostly activities with the church, working on the cars, working on the house. The thing about being in the military is that you're always moving every 2 to 3 years. So living in the same place for 12 years, I have had to learn a lot about home maintenance. And so that's been kind of a full-time job right now as we've been here for 12 years. But just enjoy reading, enjoy having some time off now that I'm semi-retired, and getting to catch up with a lot of folks.
Brilliant stuff. I think I might know this one. Favorite aircraft you have flown?
Favorite aircraft I've flown? So 2 questions that I always get. What was your favorite duty station, and what is the best aircraft that you've flown? And they were all great, both duty stations and aircraft, for different reasons. Love flying the Hornet, love the radar, you could see things. The Hornet, we actually, in VFA 25, our last tour, we deployed with the helmet-mounted cueing systems. We were the first legacy Hornet squadron to get that, so you could sit there and you could cue the radar, you could cue the FLIR simply by looking at a point. With the data link, you could sit there and find people by looking around. It was fantastic, but you're always low on gas. I never really liked that. Tomcat, pig to land on the boat, hard, difficult. You really had to be good at maintenance. You had to know which systems you could take, which systems you couldn't. But you had lots of gas. It took a lot of damage. You could bounce around and do all this. Um, Carried lots of gas, carried lots of bombs. And it looked great at the air show, man. It just looked fast, wings swept back, doing supersonic, going up to like 50,000 feet, doing 1.8 on a slick airplane. Nothing beats that. I mean, that was so cool. F-117, high tech, really neat, great mission, always a winner at air shows, got to go to the Air Fate in Mildenhall in 1996, I think it was 96 or 97, and got to do a static display. So all the airplanes were fun for different reasons. All had shortcomings for different reasons. But I think the Hornet was the funnest because it was easy to fight. It had great alpha. It was a great slow speed fighter. I don't know if any of the Air Force folks have told you about. There's a group called Dos Gringos. They play. There's a couple of Viper guys, and one of the songs they sing is, I wish I had the gas of a mud hen. I wish I had the alpha of a Hornet. And that slow speed for an old guy like me, I don't just sit there and pull like 6.5, 7Gs extended. I could just sit there, float it back, a nice scissors fight there, stay behind everyone. It was a lot of fun. So great slow speed maneuvering. Still had all the high G stuff, great performance. Hornet was the most capable by far.
Yeah. And one you would like to fly either past or present?
Interesting. I've thought about this, and the one thing that I always thought looked really, really cool was the F-8 Crusader.
Yes.
Last of the Gunfighters. That one looked like just a lot of fun. Wing popping up when you're sitting there coming back to the carrier to get the visibility. It just looked really, really cool. Doing photo reconnaissance in that. I always thought the Vigi, the A5 looked like fun. Of course, that was huge. I don't know if I really want to fly something that big off a carrier. Those were all neat. And of course, all the respect for those guys in World War II. Just a quick side story. A couple of years ago, I got introduced to a gentleman. His name was Tillman Poole, Poole. Poole was his last name. He was a Navy ace in World War II. He had 6.5 kills, credit to him. I met him when he was like 92, 93. He was still very lucid, great recollection. He died in 2019, I believe. So I got a couple years with him doing lunches, talking about carriers. And it was just really neat on how things had changed, but things remained the same. A lot of the things about living on a carrier never changed. The water tasted like jet fuel every now and then. It's always noisy on the O3 level because people are dragging chains over the deck to tie down the carriers. The food was repetitive. And the only thing that really different was the navigation. It was a lot easier for us to find the carrier when we came back from missions than he did. But again, waiting to land, night landings were not fun. It was just really neat catching up with those old guys, and that would have been fun to do it on a straight deck, landing on a straight deck back then. But again, higher accident rate, higher mortality. But I got to stick with the F-8. But just a shout out to those folks who paved the way, and of course to the UK and the Brits who brought us carrier aviation and the angled flight deck. Well done. Thanks for giving us all your great inventions.
Yeah, absolutely. And can we find you online? And do you have any books in the works? Because I'm sure people would love to hear more about your story.
So that's interesting. You mentioned that. I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and he said, you really should write a book. It's tempting. I don't find myself that interesting because I just have the same experiences that everybody else did. And I think that's what kind of makes the transitioning difficult. You're in a business meeting and you start talking about, that time I lost an engine doing a defensive VFM sortie over the Med, caught fire. I had to come back and land. The ship was turning. They wouldn't stop turning. I yelled at the boss. The boss yelled at me, and I trapped, single engine. And everybody in the business meeting is sitting there staring at you. It's like, doesn't everybody have these experiences? So I just have a different frame of reference. I guess that's normal. No books in the work yet, but it is in the back of my mind. And I am on LinkedIn, Dave Lobdell. No secret there. And I did do a story transitioning out of the military and how welcoming BP was. I worked for BP for about 12 years. Phenomenal company. It's the transition is difficult. They made it super easy, and they really gave me a lot of credit, a lot of respect for my military background. And I also have a spot on, of all places, the Texas Land Board. The Texas Land Board has a very strong veterans program, and they did Voices of the Veterans, and so they interviewed me on that. I got some of the stories on there as well. So LinkedIn, David Lobdell, I guess. And then on the Texas Land Board. That's really about it. Not a huge online presence. Don't have a social media account, but well, except for following on Instagram. But that's about it. I want to do one quick comment as well. Did the shout out to the maintainers who make you do some great interviews. I've looked at a lot of your interviews, a lot of great talks about flying. We can't do it without the maintainers, especially in the Navy. Those 17, 18-year-old kids walking around at 120 degrees on the flight deck, carrying chains in all kinds of weather. Those folks in the cold weather, the hot weather, but also, as you've heard mentioned, our mission is to support the guys on the ground. And that's, flying is cool, but we are our raison d'etre. I always mess up my French, as I told you in Quebec, is to support the guys on the ground. So the real workers are down there on the ground. When we were doing OEF in Afghanistan one time in the Hornet, we were flying overhead. We were talking to a controller, and we find him, and we're looking down. And we descend down pretty low, and he's on this position with a couple other guys on top of this mountain in the middle of nowhere. Those guys are out there, like, we're looking down at him like, man, that looks like that sucks. As we're going to, of course, in 3 hours, head back to our clean sheets and hot meals and hot showers. But those guys on the ground were doing, they're doing the Lord's work out there. So I had a great time. Thanks very much for having me on the program. And again, a wonderful learning experience watching your other videos and seeing some old friends on here as well. So thanks very much for having me on.
Brilliant stuff. Well, Beaker, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute blast talking to you and hearing a bit about your story.